being dropped off at Government House. They'll be sworn in. We expect to see a similar size cabinet to the 27 in the Eby's old cabinet, but possibly some ministries that are collapsed into each other. One speculation is that the Minister of Mental Health and Addiction will fold it back into health. That's one example, but certainly they're all getting ready to have their big moment here.
Well, tell us about the faces you are seeing, new or old.
Yeah, so I think some notable new faces from rural BC or outside of the lower mainland and the island include Randy Neal from Sunshine Coast. She's a former broadcaster. Brittany Anderson, she's a second-term MLA. I was previously the Parliamentary Secretary for Accessibility. She's in cabinet now. And also Tamara Davidson, the MLA for North Coast Haida Gwaii, a longtime federal public servant, was largely expected to be in cabinet. Some also new faces that people will know that recognize their names. Terry Young, former Vancouver police officer, Christine Boyle, Vancouver city councillor, Gary Begg, of course, the MLA who basically clinched NDP's majority by winning it by 22 seats in Surrey-Guildford, as well as Ravi Parmar and Jody Wickett. So those are just some of the new faces. It seems like, by my count, 12 new ministers, as well as some existing party faithful NDP cabinet ministers.
And who are those familiar faces then?
Well, we saw Nikki Sharma, we saw Adrian Dix, we saw Ravi Kahlon, Jody Osborne, Josie Osborne, as well as Bowen Ma. We saw Jagra Brar. Another new name, Joan Phillips. But most of I didn't notice, I could be wrong, but I didn't notice any cabinet ministers from the last time who weren't there. Now, again, it's early days and I was just scanning as they walked in, but I don't know about any high profile people who didn't get a position. And of course, there were 15 former cabinet ministers who are returning in government. So almost 50-50 in terms of new cabinet ministers versus existing cabinet ministers.
Okay, and of course, you don't know at this point what cabinet positions each one is taking. Some speculation already, wondering about who's going to take finance now that former Finance Minister Catherine Conroy, of course, didn't run in this election. Are there any likely contenders?
I mean, the big name going around is Brenda Bailey. She's a former tech executive. She's been a CEO, a COO, was the previous jobs minister. And so she's been floated as a very likely contender. Another possible shuffle, a lot of people are talking about Adrian Dix as he's the longest serving health minister BC has seen, almost 8 years in that role. So many are expecting him to get a new ministry, probably another high profile ministry. But, the health file has been difficult. We've seen emergency room closures. We've seen cancer wait times extend beyond acceptable levels, and of course, people still don't have a family doctor. Many million, or almost a million people don't. So we'll have to see if Adrian Dix is in fact shuffled, but that will be another big portfolio to watch.
And I just want to touch on something you touched on earlier. You said there are some rumblings that the Ministry of Mental Health and Addictions may be rolled back into the Health Ministry.
That's what many are saying. I don't have that confirmed,
okay.
But the Ministry of Mental Health and Addiction faced a lot of challenges because there was a perception it didn't have its own budget. It was getting its money from the health ministry. And so, of course, decriminalization was a tough issue for the government. What I have been told is that the government is going to focus on the meat and potato issues, affordability, healthcare, public safety. So perhaps some ministries that people feel were going beyond their mandate will be scaled back. Another, interesting thing to watch is for finance, how soon can the government roll out the affordability rebate that Eby announced during the campaign? That's the $500 for individuals or $1,000 for households that will be given to about 90% of British Columbians to help with affordability costs. Do British Columbians have to wait until the budget in February, or will they find a way to have a cabinet order to give that money faster so that people can have relief? So whoever is the next finance minister will be charged with that task.
People will be wondering. And one more question, Katie. 27 cabinet ministers last in the previous government. And what kind of number are you seeing, if there's an estimate there?
Again, it seemed like it's pretty much the same because I saw 12 new faces. And again, I didn't see any people who weren't in cabinet that were before. So if we are 15 plus 12, that puts us at 27. So, but again, there could be ministries that are collapsed. There could be new ministries. So it looks like about the same. But once we get in, we'll find out the exact ministries and where Eby's priorities lie.
Katie, you are going to be very busy in the next hour here. And thank you so much for taking the time and giving us some of the early intel as you stand outside Government House.
Thank you. Thank you, Michelle.
It's Katie DeRosa, CBC's Provincial Affairs reporter. It is now 12:13 Pacific time. We are taking your calls on this for this half hour, and our phone lines are open. You can call us now, and I'll give you the numbers in one moment once again. Now, one of the questions, though, that will be answered in the next hour is, as you heard, whether Adrian Dix will remain as BC's health minister. Now, former BC NDP cabinet minister Mo Sahota spoke to CBC's Early Edition this morning, and Sahota says that whatever happens, Premier Eby will want to utilize Dix's competencies.
Adrian Dix is probably the best healthcare minister that British Columbia has ever had. And he showed his adeptness and his knowledge of that portfolio as he guided British Columbia through the pandemic. And he's dealt with a lot of the issues that have followed afterwards with regards to the healthcare system. He's also very smart, intelligent, and he has a depth of experience in government. And I'm sure that the biggest sort of personal issue that the Premier's been struggling with is whether or not he takes that intelligence and that depth of experience and asks Adrian to apply his skill set elsewhere, or whether he keeps him in healthcare. And I don't want to speculate one way or the other, but that is one of the various personalities that I'm sure that David is really thinking about in terms of how they best employ their skills.
That is former BC NDP Cabinet Minister Mo Sahota speaking on the political panel on the CBC's Early Edition this morning. You can listen to that full segment. Just use the CBC Listen app and search for the Early Edition. We're asking you here on BC Today, as David Eby says his new cabinet will focus on issues British Columbians are thinking about at the kitchen table. What are those kitchen table topics that you'd like BC's new cabinet to focus on? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can also hit pound 690 or email us bctoday@cbc.ca. This is BC Today, and as you heard from our provincial affairs reporter, Katie DeRosa, some new faces in cabinet already that we know of. They were on the bus heading into Government House and expected to be presented by Premier David Eby to the Lieutenant Governor. Randy Neal, who was elected on Powell River Sunshine Coast, is on the bus, is expected to be a cabinet minister. Brittany Anderson, who was elected in Kootenay Central, Tamara Davidson, North Coast Haida Gwaii, and some Vancouver elected MLAs, Terry Young, Christine Boyle as well, and Joan Phillip, and Gary Begg in Surrey Guildford as well. So some of the new names that you can expect to be in cabinet as the swearing-in ceremony begins this afternoon. As well, Katie DeRosa said that she saw all familiar faces, all the former cabinet ministers who ran again on that bus as well. So we're taking your calls, your thoughts on those choices, and the kitchen table issues that Premier Eby is focused on. Our numbers again, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. We have an email too to bctoday@cbc.ca. Frank writes, the main kitchen table issue for us as a retired couple is inflation. When you're on a fixed income and inflation bites, your ability to buy what you used to buy diminishes. One of our pensions is not indexed to inflation, so it is worth quite a bit less than it was. Taxes still take just as much, whether it is income tax, sales tax, or carbon tax. And we're getting no help from either Ottawa or Victoria to pay the bills. Rob writes, the NDP needs to urgently address the issue of clear cutting and the side effects, specifically flooding, landslides, and wildfires. Thank you so much for your emails, bctoday@cbc.ca. And my guest now is Hamish Telford, Associate Professor of Political Science at the University of the Fraser Valley. Hi there, Hamish. Thanks so much for being with us.
You're welcome, Michelle. Good afternoon.
Your thoughts on some of the names that you heard there?
Yes, we were expecting new faces. 12 ministers did not come back. 7 decided not to run in the last election, and 5 were defeated. So he was down 12, and about half of the parliamentary secretaries also didn't come back. They are sort of the training ground for new cabinet ministers. So it's going to be interesting to see who goes where. One of the thoughts that I have about this was that this was a change election. And David Eby has acknowledged after the election that the people are not happy with the state of affairs in terms of health, in terms of affordability, in terms of housing, and he's promising to act on it. But he already had his best people in those roles: Adrian Dixon, health; Ravi Kahlon in housing; Mike Farnworth in public safety. So does he go with continuity when this was a change election, put his best people back in those roles, or does he switch things up because people are not happy with the direction his government was going in last time? So we will see in about an hour what he decided.
Yeah, and we'll also see, I guess we are seeing that some of that rural representation. There's been that question around the NDP government needing to reach out beyond the South Coast. And so we see Randy Neal, for Powell River, Sunshine Coast, but up in North Coast, Haida Gwaii, Tamara Davidson, Brittany Anderson in the Kootenays. How far does that go, do you think, to address those questions around how well the NDP can reach out to rural and remote parts of the province?
Well, they have very few seats in the rural parts of the province. They do have the North Coast Haida Gwaii riding. They've got 3 or 4 in the interior. I was expecting Harwinder Sandhu from Vernon to be in cabinet this time round. Katie DeRosa did not mention seeing her on the bus, but we'll see if she shows up in cabinet as well. But a number of these people are rookies. Randy Neal, Tamara Davidson, these are brand new rookies to the legislature going straight into cabinet. So it's going to be a steep learning curve for these individuals.
Let's take a call now. Victor in Brackendale. Hi there.
Yeah, a big concern is cost of housing and rental. And we finally got a government in place that has corrected what the previous governments have done to us. Example, Christy Clark taking an airline full of realtors to Asia, and within a few months, housing prices almost doubled.
Okay, so looking at the foreign investments
area
issue.
Where I've got 2 empty houses here that are owned by people from China. She's overrunning her business, and one behind me sitting empty that a family could use. This is a government that's corrected all the past, like the toll on the Port Mann Bridge. People forget about that, right?
So what do you think then? We just heard from Hamish Telford that this election was seen as a change election, and Premier David Eby himself saying that we've gotten the message. We received the message from British Columbians that we want change.
A lot of it had to do with an anti-Trudeau election. People thought they were voting federally when they weren't.
In terms of what they thought they were demanding. Okay.
A lot of people thought they were voting federal to get Trudeau ousted, and exactly what happened. So,
and so, Victor, it sounds like what you would like is stay the course.
Well, how can we change the damage when everything's foreign owned now? No questions asked about where the money comes from.
Well, you do have to file, where you're from, what properties you own are, and all of that, and there's also the vacancy tax that, as you say, was brought in by the NDP.
It's a good place to launder money to in Canada, as you found out in the Kamloops area with the drug scene.
Okay.
So that's part of it too.
Victor, there's
Facts.
the drug issue as well. Victor, thank you very much for the call from Brackendale. So housing and that issue of the foreign investment, how far did the NDP get in addressing that when it came to, making sure people who were owners were able to prove that they were living in homes that they owned, or if there were secondary properties, they had to file for that and pay the vacancy tax. How far has the NDP gotten on the housing issue, Hamish?
Well, those were the low-hanging fruits that could be picked. The vacancy tax, the speculation tax. Those were the first things that we did because those targeted foreigners rather than BC residents and voters. But that only got us so far, and we've had to try and go further. The government has moved now to ban short-term rentals, trying to free those properties up for longer-term rentals because we desperately need more rental space. But of course, the big issue was supply and getting housing built. And that has required the provincial government to come down pretty hard on municipalities to overcome some of the bylaws and restrictions on development. And that's why Ravi Kahlon, who has been housing minister, has ruffled a lot of feathers across the province. And it'll be interesting to see if he stays in that role or moves on to another one. I would note with our caller Victor from Brackendale that there's lots of development going on in Squamish. As soon as you drive into Squamish, there are condos all over the place, new townhouses. So in that community, at least, we are seeing the supply coming to fruition.
Okay, let's take another call. Housing certainly still top of mind. Let's take a call now from Ben. I was going to put out the phone numbers once again. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. Hi there, Ben in Prince George. Go ahead. What is the kitchen table issue for you? Hi, Ben. Can you hear me?
Yes, hi, sorry.
No problem. No problem. Go ahead.
No, I missed the question.
Oh, yes. What is the kitchen table issue that you think the BC cabinet should address and focus on?
My kitchen issue involves the 105-kilometer-hour speed limit. Because I drive a commercial vehicle, and while my vehicle is considered heavy, my load is not, I'm stuck at 105. So with this speed restriction, it is added, at a minimum, it has added 2.5 extra weeks of work to my year.
Oh, how much faster do you think you need to go?
Well, no, it's not about the speed overall. It's about the ability to pass safely. And if I can't have the ability to pass safely, I have to do because I'm a commercial driver. But when it takes me over a kilometer and 1.2 kilometers to pass somebody going 5 kilometers slower than me, there's an issue. So the NDP is big on spending time with family, work-life balance, fair wages. Up north here, a lot of us are paid by the load or by the kilometer. We're not by the hour, and we don't have a lot of 4 lanes out of the Vancouver, Okanagan area.
Right.
So my question is, who is going to pay me for my time for that extra 2.5 weeks a year that I'm forced to work?
And in terms of a day, Ben, what does that mean in terms of extra time? How did you get to that 2.5 weeks?
15 minutes.
15 minutes a day.
Yeah, and my route a day is only just over 570 kilometers.
Okay. Well, very interesting point that you make. And have other truckers raised this as well?
Well, there's nobody to raise it with because the BC Trucking Association jumped right on board with this. We have no independent truckers union, and most of the unions are for it because their members are paid by the hour.
Okay.
Okay.
And so why are you different?
Because I'm non-union, and I'm salary.
I see.
So, and see, when I bid my job, when I went to my employer and we discussed this, it was, this might come in and everything else. But when you look at these owner operators
Okay.
that are in Prince George or logging stuff, the guys that are paid by the load,
So there's
they
a
have
difference
law.
there. Okay, Ben, thank you very much. I have to jump in. My apologies, but that's a really interesting point you make. You get into the differences between commercial truck drivers and how they're paid, and the impact of this 105 kilometer speed limit has on you. Now, the BC Trucking Association says this marks a significant step forward when it comes to safety. The province says that the change that was brought in April brings BC into alignment with other jurisdictions. So as you say, those organizations support it, but a trucker as yourself does not, and that it affects your livelihood. Thanks for the call. Let's go to Jane in Vernon. Hi, Jane.
Hi.
Hi. What is the kitchen table issue for you for the cabinet?
My kitchen table issue is I would like to see the new cabinet stop subsidizing fossil fuels. Fossil fuels, of course, are causing climate change, and climate change is really impacting BC with climate disasters, and it is eating up our tax dollars at a ridiculous rate.
Do you think that that's going to be something that will be a focus, given they seem to be thinking about things like affordability and housing? Are you concerned that perhaps that's going to be a little bit in the shadows?
Absolutely. Our number one expense in BC this year was fighting forest fires. Right after that, I live in Vernon, which is in the Okanagan, which is a tourist area. Those forest fires filled our skies with smoke, shut down our airport for a while. David Eby had to ask tourists not to come to the Okanagan because they had no hotels, because they were full of evacuees, which needed them because they were out of their homes. Followed up by the cattlemen not being able to get enough feed for their cows because of climate change destroying their crops. Followed up by the wine industry being hit, and taxpayers had to pay to replant vines. After that, the soft fruit industry in the Okanagan was hit. We had no cherries, peaches, apricots. It just goes one after another, and taxpayers cannot afford to underwrite every climate disaster. We will be brought to our knees financially.
Jane, talk about being really at the front, in the front row when it comes to climate change, those impacts that you talk about there. Jane, thank you for the call from Vernon. Yeah. The impact on the Okanagan from forest fires. Hamish, yes, we're hearing, you need to talk about climate change. We heard a call about housing. What are the big issues do you think that this cabinet will be focused on with direction from Premier Eby?
Well, obviously, a cabinet has to manage the whole range of government. The question is, what will the emphasis be? I don't think we're going to have a stronger sense of what that is going to be today. I think we need to wait for the budget to see what the kitchen table issues are that the government is going to focus on, and we won't get that until February. But as I said before, this election seemed to revolve around a couple of core issues: healthcare, housing, affordability, as well as public safety. And so I would anticipate that in the budget, we will see action on that. In addition, we've already talked about the affordability rebate, the tax cut that we're going to get, but we'll see what other measures the government has in mind when they get to the budget in a couple of months.
Okay, and see what's in that throne speech. Hamish, thank you so much. Always great to speak with you. I think we'll be talking in February.
I'm sure we will. Thank you, Michelle.
That's Hamish Telford, Associate Professor of Political Science at UFV. It's 12:31 now. This is BC Today. We'll take a couple more of your calls on this. And coming up as well after the 12:30 news, we'll talk about the H5N1 avian flu and the case that is here in BC, the first domestically acquired human case of H5N1 avian flu. What do you need to know about it? Dr. Melissa Lem will join us to take your calls. Right now, here's a CBC News update and Robert Zimmerman.
Good afternoon. Doctors at Nanaimo General and Victoria's Royal Jubilee Hospitals have opened unsanctioned overdose prevention sites. Dr. Jess Wilder, an addictions medicine and family doctor in Nanaimo, says there's a dire need for the sites to save lives, and the government failed to open the facilities as promised. Wilder says harmful narratives about the drug crisis have been pushed by people with no medical expertise. A special weather statement is in effect for much of BC's coast as high winds are expected to hit the region tomorrow evening. The wind event known as a bomb cyclone is expected to last into Wednesday morning. Winds could reach up to 100 kilometers an hour on Vancouver Island, up to 70 kilometers an hour here in Metro Vancouver. Up to 50 millimeters of rain is also expected. And Environment Canada is also warning drivers of hazardous conditions for the southern interior. It says 5 to 10 centimeters of snow will fall today along the Coquihalla. And now the forecast on the north coast, a chance of showers or flurries this afternoon with a high of 4, highs around -7 with periods of light snow in the Peace. In the central interior, including Prince George, a few flurries with a high of -1. Highs to 3 degrees with a chance of flurries or showers this afternoon in the Kootenays. In the southern interior, including Kelowna, mainly cloudy with a high of 4. And a chance of showers this afternoon in the Fraser Valley. A bit of sunshine in Metro Vancouver and Greater Victoria with highs around 8. That's your CBC News update from Vancouver.
Thank you very much, Rob.
You're welcome.
Robert Zimmerman in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. You're with BC Today here on CBC, and we have been taking your calls on the new cabinet that's going to be sworn in just over half an hour from now, starting at 1 o'clock. And Premier David Eby says the public can expect cabinet ministers to focus on kitchen table issues, what they're thinking about around the kitchen table in British Columbia. Things like cost of living, healthcare, and public safety. Well, we have a call from Justin in Vancouver. Hi, Justin.
Hello there.
Hey, what are your thoughts?
My kitchen topic issue, since my household is full of construction workers, is when we're finally getting running toilets and running water on construction sites.
As opposed to porta potties.
EB made and has not come through yet.
I remember that announcement. I wondered that as I drove by a porta potty yesterday. It wasn't a construction site, but I wondered if that had already been in place. So you haven't seen anything at your work sites, Justin?
No, I've been on dozens of work sites and I haven't seen a single running toilet yet. And they talk about people building homes and getting more homes done, but I feel like we'd be more productive getting these houses built if we had some running toilets.
Okay, Justin, thank you very much for raising that.
Thank you.
And now WorkSafe BC says while the changes come into effect October 1st, they will work with construction companies during the next few months to ensure that they're aware of the changes and understand what is required to comply. That coming from the province when this was announced. Again, that issue, of bringing flush toilets to construction work sites. That has been an important one for workers in the construction industry. Thank you, Justin, for your call. Asking you what are the kitchen table issues you'd like the BC government and its new cabinet to focus on. As the Premier David Eby said, the public can expect his new cabinet appointees to be focused on those kitchen table issues, what British Columbians are talking about around the kitchen table. What a way to get people thinking and bring that imagery to mind. So we're asking you, what are those issues for you? And T is calling us from Ladysmith. Hi there, T.
Hello.
Hello. What are you concerned about?
Healthcare. I don't understand how they can say that we're going to listen to what people say around kitchen tables because they don't listen to the people.
Why are you so concerned about healthcare? And of course, it seems evident, but is there a specific reason why this is a top concern for you?
Coming to an age where you need a bit more healthcare. And not only that, but I see a neighbor here, he had to really degrade to get healthcare. I have a friend who has to go back to Japan to get cancer treatment. We are a first world country, pretend to be one, but politician doesn't listen to the ones who are hiring them.
But the
Which is
voters, you
sad.
mean?
Sorry?
The voters.
Yeah, the voters. Yeah, because we are paying tax, and tax goes into their pocket as salaries.
Okay. And yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's sad to see that they're saying we're going to listen to what the kitchen table is saying, but they don't actually do that. It's like when the premier said, the prime minister said, "I hear you," but nothing happens. It's a slogan they use to think that we are going to be silenced with this. And I wish they could listen to your program, because maybe that will help them. Or walk around and talk to people, not sit in their offices and think that they know everything the best. I've spoken to doctors here now who are tired of all the bureaucracy they have to go through to treat people.
We're about to speak to a doctor, in fact, in a moment. But T, thank you very much for your call and that issue of healthcare, looking to the province as it is a provincial issue, but saying that the government has not been listening on what people need when it comes to healthcare and when it comes to cancer treatment. A friend of his has to travel outside the country. We'll look to see who will be put in health. And again, that question around a longtime health minister, now Adrian Dix, there has been some speculation as to whether he will remain in that portfolio. And so we'll watch to see what happens there in about half an hour from now. And thank you as well to Daniel, who called. He says BC needs to make the changes that were promised with regard to daylight saving time and not wait for the U.S. before making those adjustments. Thank you for all of your calls. You can still email us, bctoday@cbc.ca. It is 12:39 now. Well, let's talk more about healthcare and a specific issue. There are still questions about Canada's first domestically acquired human case of H5N1 avian influenza. A BC teen is in critical condition at BC Children's Hospital. The case was announced almost a week ago now by Provincial Health Officer Dr. Bonnie Henry. Now, today, the Provincial Health Office told us there is no update. An investigation continues to determine the source of the infection and also warned the public to be cautious about posts they see online about it. There's a lot of speculation on X and or Twitter, as was formerly known. Not surprising, perhaps, because health information and misinformation is rampant online. So we're asking you, how do you wade through all of that when it comes to latest diet fads or miracle ingredients, miracle supplements? All of that is mixed in with valid information and community support. So how do you wade through all of it to actually be able to help yourself? And we're going to talk about that with Dr. Melissa Lem. We're taking your calls. First, what do you need to know about the H5N1 avian influenza virus? And what steps do you take to ensure that you're getting reliable, credible health information when you're online? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. Our email again is bctoday@cbc.ca. Dr. Melissa Lem joins me now, a family physician and clinical assistant professor at the University of BC's Faculty of Medicine. Dr. Lem, good afternoon. Nice to see you again.
Good afternoon, Michelle. Great to be back.
Well, we want to know, what we know, what we don't know about H5N1 avian influenza. A lot of questions there. What do you think British Columbians should know about it?
Well, first of all, I think they should know a bit about the history of H5N1, which is one of the different kinds of avian influenza. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a virus, an influenza-type virus, and it's typically carried by migratory birds within Canada that come into contact with domestic birds like chickens. And it spreads extremely easily within these bird populations, but it's rare for humans to catch it and transmit it from human to human. And you mentioned this one case that we saw in a BC teenager. So this is the first case of a domestic human acquisition of this virus within Canada. And we've seen about 50 cases in the US since March, and then about 900 cases globally since we saw the first human case in the 1990s. And I just want people to know that until now, it's been very rare for transmission to happen from human to human. It still is quite rare. And to avoid it in general, avoiding close contact with birds or their saliva or their droppings is very important. But it's also common, or not common, but possible to acquire it through droplets or aerosols. So anytime you're around kind of a large flock of birds, whether you work among them or whether you're kind of recreationally among them with your family or your pets, it's good to pay attention, extra attention right now.
Given that, how concerning is this?
Well, it is concerning to public health because one issue is that, again, we haven't seen much human-to-human transmission yet, but because we're just ramping up flu season right now, it's possible if a human were to be co-infected with avian influenza and the regular highly transmissible human-to-human influenza, that there could be some crossover between the two viruses, and then you could start to see an avian influenza that is more easily transmitted between humans. And this is quite concerning because we know that cases to date, there's about a 50% mortality rate when a human catches avian influenza. Now that said, that statistic may be a bit inflated because often, very typically, mild cases won't go reported, but there is quite a high case morbidity and mortality rate if a human were to catch avian influenza.
Okay, and because of the different strains, the H5N1 is known to be more likely to have severe symptoms. Is that correct?
That's right. So if a human were to catch it, which again, to date has been quite rare, only about 900 cases globally in the last 20 to 30 years, they will often experience, if it becomes a serious case, what's called acute respiratory distress syndrome, is when your lung tissue becomes inflamed because of an over-response from your immune system, and your airways fill with fluid, and that often requires hospitalization in an acute care setting, which is what we saw in the teenager who's been hospitalized in BC.
Okay. My guest is Dr. Melissa Lam, a clinical assistant professor at UBC's Faculty of Medicine, a frequent guest here on medical and health issues. And we are asking you can call us. What do you want to know, need to know about the H5N1 avian influenza in light of the first domestically acquired human case of H5N1 avian influenza? It is here in BC. It is a first in Canada. And let us know if you have any questions. And let us know as well where you go or how you seek credible, reliable health information online. There is a whole lot out there. There are podcasts, there are influencers, there are posts on TikTok. So how do you wade through all of them to find what's actually helpful and correct? So 1-800-825-5950 is our phone number, or 604-669-3733. You can also hit pound 690 on your mobile phone or email us bctoday@cbc.ca. And it's interesting that Dr. Lam talked about the need to be vaccinated for human influenza viruses because of what may be that risk if you were to get both. Correct me if I'm wrong in terms of how I'm interpreting what you've just said, Dr. Lam. But Dr. Bonnie Henry actually said that it's still in the realm of research, but we know that protecting yourself through vaccination from human strains of influenza is important when animal strains are circulating. Now,
That's correct.
CBC's Quirks and Quarks, we actually learned a little bit more about this. The host, Bob McDonald, spoke to Matthew Miller at McMaster University, and he is the Canada Research Chair in Viral Pandemics, and he explained a bit more about this.
What concerns do you have about the timing of this case, considering we're coming into flu season?
Well, one of the unique properties of influenza viruses is that they're able to mix and match their genetic material with their fellow influenza viruses very readily. So for the current H5N1 virus to learn to spread well between people, that's a relatively hard task. The virus has to undergo a lot of sort of adaptation and selection of mutations, so it's typically a slow process. However, if an individual is infected at the same time with a human influenza virus, which spreads very well from person to person, and an avian influenza virus. The avian influenza virus could pick up parts of the human influenza virus that allow it to spread efficiently. And so at this time of year, as we move into the season where we have a high degree of circulation of our seasonal flus, the risk that those kind of events could happen increases substantially.
That is Matthew Miller, Canada Research Chair in Viral Pandemics at McMaster University. You can call us with your questions about H5N1, or let us know as well where you go, what you do when it comes to seeking out health information online. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. And I imagine, Dr. Lem, that for you, what does that say about that need to be up to date on your vaccinations?
It's really interesting, Michelle, listening to the comments of your previous callers around climate change, around the healthcare system, around good plumbing, because they all intersect when these issues come to promoting our health. And it is extremely important for us to be vaccinated. It's a safe, effective public health measure that has kept generations of people in this country and elsewhere safe from transmissible and deadly viruses that can cause a lot of disability. And speaking about misinformation, I know this is another question that your callers will be speaking to. There's a lot of misinformation out there right now about vaccines. We are seeing a vaccine anti-vaxxer essentially being held forward as possibly being nominated as the health secretary of the United States. And there was a prior prime minister here who said that when the U.S. sneezes, Canada catches a cold. So there's a real risk of this kind of misinformation about this very effective public health measure not being taken up by people in Canada, even if it is going to be a life-saving measure.
Let's take a call now from Karen in Victoria. And you have a question about H5N1, Karen?
Oh, hi. Thanks for having me on the show.
Sure.
I was going to share that if I'm looking for information on health, there are a couple of things that I routinely do. I check to see if the study is peer-reviewed, and also I look to see who has funded the study, because obviously, biased parties will fund studies to have the outcome that they want to push their agenda. So I think that's always important to do. But the other thing regarding zoonotic diseases, as this is another one, since SARS and COVID and, the diseases, the viruses that have mostly been circulating in Africa that are zoonotic, H5N1 has very rapidly transformed to be able to infect mammals. And I just, in an average poultry farm, there are thousands and thousands of birds. And it's a petri dish for this virus to keep evolving and keep trying new virus structures to infect as easily and quickly as possible. So I'd like to understand why Health Canada and CBC is not doing some bit more exposure or providing information on getting us away from animal farming. It is a constant source of zoonotic illness. Right now, about 70% of the antibiotics we produce in the world are fed to livestock, causing, a bacterial problem as well. But this is, to me, this would be such a simple, relatively simple way of combating zoonotic diseases, is to move to a plant-based food system and get away from farming animals.
Karen, thank you very much for your call. And we know that BC's chief veterinarian has told clinics to treat wild birds, that do treat wild birds, to establish protocols to prevent the spread of avian flu. We do know, as you said, that the commercial poultry sector in BC has been hit hard by avian flu over the past couple of years, especially. More than 6.5 million birds have been culled since the spring of 2022. Right now, about 28 flocks are infected. Now, what she has said is that wild birds have shown high levels of H5N1 flu. So right now, so far, the number of wild birds being reported with the infection is similar to 2022 and 23. But they are believed to be the primary carrier of the disease, migratory wild birds. But the government data also shows that infected species have included things like hawks, ravens, and herons locally here. Anything to add to that, Dr. Lem, in terms of do we then need to look at agriculture, to look at our commercial poultry farming industry?
I think this is a really great set of comments by the previous caller because it speaks to how when humans don't respect our planetary health systems, so whether it's habitats that start to encroach, human habitats that start to encroach on animal habitats, or factory farming that puts a lot of animals in close proximity and can then amplify and spread viruses really quickly, this speaks to how we need to respect these complex Earth systems more in order to reduce this zoonotic transmission and reduce the risk of pandemics. And just to comment on how healthy a plant-rich diet is, Health Canada itself recommends that half your diet should be fruits and vegetables, a quarter protein, preferably plant-based proteins, and a quarter whole grains. And so this is not only a diet that's really healthy for us, the best evidence says that it's healthiest for us, but also healthy for the planet. So we should be choosing plant-based proteins more often than animal-based proteins whenever we can, and reducing that demand will hopefully reduce demand for these factory farms that essentially fill our grocery stores and restaurants with animal products that can increase when they're grown in certain factory farms the risk of bird flu spreading among them.
Just
to humans.
To be clear, though, there is no food safety issue when it comes to avian
No,
flu.
exactly. If you cook your food well, yes, exactly. So far, there have been no food safety issues identified within Canada.
Here's a really good question. Joan emailed to say, I'm a bit concerned. A highlight of my day is usually doing qigong in the forest, and the chickadees and other small birds often land on me because I move so slowly. They think I'm a tree. I don't and never have fed them. Also wondering about picking up feathers, which I used to do for drawing purposes. So she's looking for suggestions around behavior around birds. Really good question.
Well, there is, as mentioned, quite a low risk of picking up avian influenza from birds right now that we know of. But I would say in this time, if you want to be extra careful, maybe try to avoid that kind of close contact with birds because we know that it is spreading within British Columbia. I just want to mention I threw a birthday party for my 10-year-old son at a biodiversity museum, and some of the specimens were dead birds. And one of the little boys actually said, I don't want to touch those because I'm afraid I might get bird flu. And the interpreter said, don't worry, they've been sterilized. It's safe in here. So I would say, if you have a domestic bird at home, and especially if they're not exhibiting any signs of illness, and if you're just casually coming into contact with birds in the wild, I wouldn't worry too much, but just be on guard. And if you do develop flu-like symptoms within 10 days of close contact with a bird, please go and see your family doctor or another medical professional to make sure that you don't have something that could be at risk of worsening.
Okay. We have an email from Jordan who writes, regarding online health misinformation, avoid using YouTube or other video sites or podcasts for this type of information, as there's no way for you to verify what's being presented. And I have a minute here for Jillian in Port Alberni, who would like to share what she does to ensure her information is reliable. Hi, Jillian.
Hi. I use the WHO website, their media briefings, as the gold standard. WHO is not some sort of world government plot. It's the only agency on the planet that has a hope of keeping up with global health. They have introductory courses for free on all the emerging diseases. So that's my go-to. And after that, I use CDC's and University of Maryland, Mayo Clinic, things like that. But I do have one question, and that is, why have Health Canada and BC Health essentially stopped reporting COVID stats because COVID never went away. The WHO is being hamstrung by the lack of data because half the countries on the planet, as of June 14th, stopped reporting their data.
Jillian, thank you very much. I do have to jump in. I only have a minute left. Dr. Lem, do you know what's happened there? Or?
I don't know.
Okay.
You would have to ask
Fair
Health
enough.
Canada. You'd have to ask the BC CDC.
Fair enough. I wasn't sure about that. Jillian, thank you very much. And also wanted to touch again on the contact with birds. Dr. Bonnie Henry's advice was not to touch sick or dead birds and keep your pets away, just to go back to that as well. Obviously, a lot of interest in how to wade through health information, misinformation online. One last bit of advice. What should people look for? Is it about looking for those organizations?
I agree. So trusted organizations are really important, like Health Canada, like any major national or provincial specialty society, like, for example, the College of Family Physicians of Canada or Society of Obstetricians and Gynecologists of Canada. We know there's a lot of misinformation around women's health in particular. And then also be wary of people who are selling things. If they're trying to sell you a product and then putting forth information supporting the selling of that product, be wary. Do an extra double check.
Dr. Lem, so good to speak with you. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Michelle.